Hello, everyone. My name is Spencer Walsh. Welcome to today's show. We have a good one for you, as always. On today's show, we lead with some big news in the trial, or one of the trials, the first trial of Donald J. Trump. It has gone to closing statements. It has gone to the jury. We'll give you some of the details from some of the closing statements and really just remind you what this case is all about at the nuts and bolts as it heads to a jury verdict just today, I believe. Also, we are still recovering from an absolutely barbaric Israeli strike on Rafah. We have reaction now from the top U.S. officials, and I'll give you one guess. This strike did not cross Biden's red line. We'll give you his justification for that. We'll hear from John Kirby at the White House about what specifically went behind the Biden decision to justify this all the way throughout. Also, we have some really depressing details. Not to say that whatever type of weapons were used was depressing enough, considering the really horrific scenes that have come out of Rafah over the weekend, specifically on Sunday, but also very recently as well. I think within the last 24 hours. But we have some new information on the type of munitions used in the deadly strike on the Rafah tent camp. We'll give you some more updates on the war on Gaza. And also, a big story in Politico about why the Democrats are in full-blown panic mode over Joe Biden. We'll react to that as well. All right, so we start with this, though, as the criminal trial of Donald J. Trump began its 7th week. The prosecution and the defense make their final pitches to jurors, sending the landmark case into deliberations on Wednesday. A defense lawyer, Todd Blanche, spent 3 hours on Tuesday hammering Michael Cohen, the star witness of the prosecution, accusing him of perjury. He also attacked Stormy Daniels, the porn star, whose account of a tryst with Trump set in motion the charges the former president currently faces. The prosecution countered with an even longer, more detailed summation, pushing into the evening. A prosecutor, Joshua Steinglass, guided jurors through reams of evidence they had introduced, elicited, including testimony, emails, text messages, and recordings. Trump is charged with falsifying 34 business records to hide Cohen's reimbursement for a $130,000 hush money payment he made to Daniels. Trump has denied the charges and the sexual encounter. Once deliberations begin Wednesday, no one knows how long they will take. If convicted, Trump, the presumptive Republican presidential nominee, could face prison or probation. Be interesting to see, how that goes with the conviction, what they'll hand back, because it really is in these 12 jurors' hands whether or not they deliver the first ever charges on a former president. Absolutely historic time, no matter what. But some of the big takeaways that here are courtesy of the New York Times. They have provided from us, who have really been, surprise, surprise on this case, like white on rice. Michael Cohen is a liar, is probably, the defense's best bet in this situation. A human embodiment of reasonable doubt, an MVP of liars, the greatest liar of all time. This is what they have called Cohen over the course of this trial. And if jurors don't believe Trump, they may have a hard time Cohen. They may have a hard time finding Trump guilty because, of course, Cohen is essentially the one who the prosecution is using as the single voice, Trump's right-hand man in terms of doing all these things that the prosecution has accused him of. So if Blanche and the defense attorneys working for Trump are able to successfully attack the credibility of Michael Cohen, that could be their biggest chance at cutting through and getting a big really kind of upset victory. The defense portrayed the payment as a workday transaction, or just normal business transaction, and really business as usual. And this is another big part here of the defense's case. And this is really, what it all rests on. It is essentially the defense has to prove that this is essentially, as scummy as Trump is, this is business as usual for him. And the only reason this is something, normal praxis for Trump in the way he conducts his business with porn stars, with whatever. And the reason why he didn't want this to come out is not because of his election tangents. He was not trying to improperly influence the election, as the prosecutors are having, the jury believe. He is trying to essentially save face for his wife, who is just had his son, Barron, which was Melania at the time. So essentially just trying to, and still is, he's still going strong with the third wife, or was the fourth wife? I don't freaking know at this point, but essentially saying that this is not an improper use of campaign funds. This is not improper behavior around the election. It's not an in-kind campaign contribution. So it is a pretty, overreach, essentially, to charge me and try and lock me up even for something of this nature. And so that is what the jury will be deliberating on. It'd be very interesting to see how long they take. And, I'm sure there's some expert opinion about whether it's long, who's favored it's in, or whether they do it quickly. It's that in the prosecution's favor. No one really knows. But anyway, that is all the time we have for today on that. But we will obviously be continuing to follow the story. So we now will move on to Israel, and specifically the Biden administration, as they said on Tuesday that it was an absolutely horrific situation. So apparently, we've had these forcibly displaced people that have been pushed out of Rafah. So if you're essentially picturing Rafah as this, almost trapezoid, like, the city on the bottom of the Gaza Strip, they've been pushed up just north, kind of along that Mediterranean Sea border. There's a lot of I think there's 2 or 3 throughway streets that go from north to south of the Gaza Strip. It's not it's about as long as a marathon from top to bottom, to give you a sense. So it is not a long place at all. And it didn't take, I'm sure it takes as long as hell to walk there with all your stuff, but they were essentially just sent north up along that kind of Mediterranean Sea border into what Israel has, or had denoted as the safe zone, the evacuation zone. This is why we heard them crowing to people about, this is the largest evacuation in human history. It's all a bunch of BS, because what they do on Sunday, they bombed the place. They said it was the thing they're going with this time, it was they took out 2 Hamas commanders, provided no independent evidence. It's not something even the U.S. has backed up, but they essentially put massive amounts of munitions on this camp, this pretty densely populated camp in Rafah, or just north of Rafah, that burned people alive. Videos of charred corpses, a baby that I think that's going to be seared in everyone's minds, a father holding up their kid, or it couldn't even be a father, it just could have been anyone, a man holding up a dead baby with its head missing. So that is essentially what we are dealing with here. It was caused scenes of hell. And, thank God they have phones. Thank God that stuff's able to get out there, because, if we had the mainstream media to cover this stuff, we would have been absolutely screwed as to what happened. And when someone like Joe Biden comes out and says, this is not a major assault, this is not screwing up our red line here. Essentially, I think really what they mean by red line is they don't want anything that would force mass displacement into Israel, even though there's already been 2 Egyptian soldiers that have been shot by the IDF across the border. I think the real thing that the U.S. really would not want would be that kind of cross-border mass migration into Egypt that would really destabilize Egypt. But honestly, I'm sure if that has to happen, they would be willing to support Israel in doing it. But either way, the strike ignited a deadly fire that killed at least 45 people, including children. According to the Gaza Health Ministry, the ministry said 249 people were wounded. John Kirby, a spokesperson for the National Security Council, said the scale of the strike was not enough to change U.S. policy. We don't want to see a major ground operation, Kirby said, and we have not seen that. Again, this is a major ground operation that would, push troops deeply into Egypt. That would be or push troops that would eventually push Gazans into Egypt. That would be something that would, it would be too destabilizing to U.S. interests, and it's something that Kirby and Biden are really against. Although I'm not trying to say that Kirby is a big decision maker in all this, but he is kind of the guy, that if you ever notice, when things get really bad and they really need somebody to just proudly go out there and say the dumbest stuff ever in defense of Israel, that is what they do. They call on John Kirby. When it's like kind of a low down situation, maybe they'll do Karine Jean-Pierre. or they'll do Matthew Miller, but or I think the Indian guy. I apologize to him. I guess not really because he's working for the Biden administration, but I forget his name. There's tiers, and I definitely have to say Kirby is at the top when you need someone to just really come out and proudly defend Israel. And I do not mean that in a complimentary way. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel said it was, of course, a tragic accident, and this it's bad because they're going to have to do one of their quote unquote investigations where they either A, never really get back to us on that, B, just release some absolute bullshit that everyone knows is bullshit, or C, admit it when the stakes are low enough and no one's really paying attention. So the Israeli military had said the strike was targeting Hamas and used precise munitions to kill 2 senior Hamas leaders. On Tuesday, the military told spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari told a news conference that Israel jets had fired their smallest munitions they could use. And he added that our munitions alone could not have ignited a fire of this size. And again, these are people who, it's still not acknowledged, have dropped white phosphorus, not just in Gaza, but on southern Lebanon as well. So I don't want to hear jack shit from them about what they have in their munitions and what power that could use. It's impossible really to trust when you've seen it being inaccurate so many times. It's impossible to take these people in any way seriously. Kamala Harris said the word tragic doesn't even begin to describe the deaths of the displaced Palestinians who were in the camp. Ms. Harris, speaking during a swearing-in ceremony for the U.S. official to the UN, did not answer a follow-up question on whether the bloodshed crossed a red line for Mr. Biden. Which kind of gives an interesting kind of inkling to maybe Harris would handle the situation differently. But again, I feel like honestly just grasping at straws at this point because, if we're all being honest, we know Biden's going to stay in there and he's going to continue to exercise all this influence. And again, this puts, to my mind, an absolute complete lie to all this BS. And it's honestly so tempting. Like, I think I probably got a little too hopeful around the time where Biden, on this show, around the time when Biden was talking about, we're going to suspend weapons. This is finally going too far. We're going to pause this weapon shipment. I'm like, is this maybe the beginning of a turning point here to stop any sort of attack on Rafah? Again, babies burned alive in front of our eyes here, and there's just no red line being crossed. It proves again and again what I should have gone to, which is my theory that I've returned back to, which is the quote that Antony Blinken said, just give us something that we could tell the people back home so we could continue supporting you. And this is what it happened to be this time. It just happened to be, we're going to pause this weapon shipment. And it wasn't a major military operation. Like, this is and increasingly now, and I think it's been this way for a long time, absolutely nobody self-respecting who doesn't already have a dog in this fight is buying it. Nobody is buying it. It's ringing more and more hollow every time. That's why they have to kind of up it and pretend to cut weapon shipments in a substantial way to Israel. But in the end, as we have seen here, it continues to mean absolutely nothing. There is no red line. There is no point in which they stop supporting Israel. It is all a ruse. It is all a PR stunt. Just like that pier that we were supposed, that was probably about 2 or 3 cycles of this ago, back in the State of the Union, when they're like, this is just did a really bad strike in Rafah. State of the Union's coming up. Our base is pissed off at us about Gaza. We're gonna build this pier. The pier never gets built. And then people are like, hey, what happened to that pier? They build it right away. They build it so shittily that it falls apart in 2 seconds, and it's now in the sea. And we're supposed to go, thank you, Joe Biden. We'll vote for you. It's absolutely ridiculous. It is beyond. It is so stupid. So anyway, this is the face of the White House. This is the person representing the man that thousands and thousands of people are going to yell at you to vote for. Celebrities are going to be like, you're a fascist if you don't vote for Joe Biden. This is what his spokesperson has to say about what we just saw in Rafah over the weekend.
How does this not violate the red line that the president laid out?
As I said, we don't want to see a major ground operation. We haven't seen that at this point.
How many more charred corpses does he have to see before the president considers a change in policy?
We don't want to see a single more innocent life taken. And I kind of take a little offense at the question. No civilian casualties is the right number of civilian casualties.
Talk about taking offense to the question. By the way, that is a hell of a freaking question from a CBS reporter, Ed O'Keefe there. And it's not something, if maybe Ryan Graham or Syed Ericott snuck in there, you'd expect that from them, but not somebody who's part of the White House main press pool in Ed O'Keefe for one of the three major networks. But, can we talk about how offensive that is? One civilian casualty is one too many. And it's just we've seen so many civilian casualties. You just sent them more weapons. It's just it is beyond. It is absolutely beyond. Their own logic is increasingly becoming, transparently illogical. And it is incredible to see how pot committed they are to sticking by it.
This is not something that we've turned a blind eye to, nor has it been something we've ignored or neglected to raise with our Israeli counterparts, including, Ed, this weekend.
Honestly, I don't even know what's worse. You haven't said anything at all, or that you've said a bunch of stuff over time and literally nothing has changed. It's gotten worse. This is why people, even if you're not the biggest pro-Palestinian person ever, this is why Joe Biden looks absolutely disgusting to you. It's because he is pathetic. He is either a complete bullshitter or he is too weak that our number one ally, who would literally not exist without U.S. support in today's day and age, would literally not exist. And we can't even tell them, please do this. Please stop killing babies and have them listen to us. Instead, they go kill more. That is the level of command of respect the Biden administration has with our allies. And when it comes to an issue of just, again, killing civilians en masse, it makes it all the more repulsive.
As a result of this particular strike. Now, they're investigating it, so let's let them investigate it and see what they come up with.
But the president doesn't have a personal limit.
I could do this job. It's just you say three things over and over again. It is the most low effort, just disgusting thing ever. Hold on. I don't want to get the beginning of the question here before we play it again.
Have a personal limit to this?
The president has been very clear and very direct about what our expectations are for Israeli operations.
It's beyond belief. It's literally
Rafah,
beyond belief.
Specifically, but in Gaza writ large. We won't support a major ground operation in Rafah. And we've, again, been very consistent on that. And the president said that should that occur, then it might make him have to make different decisions in terms of support. We haven't seen that happen at this point.
What a joke.
Come out and say that himself.
The president has been speaking to leaders throughout the region on a regular basis. He has been addressing you guys in various fora. You've got plenty of opportunities to talk to the president, including, I might add, in a press conference last week.
Again, I think the bottom line with this is the only good thing that we can really be, I think, truly confident of is that less and less people are buying this with every single cycle in which it repeats through, And this with some of the worst, it's tough to say, but some of the worst pictures that we've seen yet out of this war, out of this genocide, it is the really, really remarkable. This has got to be one of the worst incidents that we have seen yet. And we have some more information just coming in from CNN 2 hours ago about the weapons that were used in this deadly strike on the Rafah tent camp. And there were U.S.-made munitions, according to an CNN. By the way, we'd see this maybe in an electronic intifada 2, 3, 4 months ago. And I think, it doesn't mean that anything's going to happen, but it is, I think, noteworthy of pointing that CNN is covering these stories here about a deadly strike with U.S. weapons being used. The CNN geolocated videos showing tents in flames in the aftermath of the strike on the camp for internally displaced people, known as Kuwait Peace Camp 1. So it was created by Kuwait. In videos shared on social media, which CNN geolocated the same scene by matching details, including the camp's entrance sign and the tiles on the ground, the tail of a U.S.-made GBU-39 small diameter bomb, SDB, is visible, according to 4 weapons explosive experts who reviewed the seen for CNN. The GBU, manufactured by Boeing, is a high-precision munition designed to attack strategically important point targets and result in low collateral damage, explosive weapons expert Chris Cobb told CNN. However, using any munition, even of this size, will always incur risks in a densely populated area, Cobb Smith, a former British artillery officer, said. Maybe this is the fact that they probably have, open fuel sources or, maybe at least like a generator, that is powering their whole tent that's running off of maybe like 1 liter of fuel a day because that's how much is able to get in there. Maybe, I don't know. I would honestly not be surprised if they intentionally target that and call it, a Hamas generator. We find that out in the future. Like this is something that it is a bomb. By the way, it's a U.S.-made bomb, and funnily enough, it is made by Boeing, which is I feel like someone much smarter than me can make a great essay about how those things could connect together as this really just epitomized version, this platonic ideal of the U.S. military-industrial complex. In one hand, killing people in Gaza, in one hand, killing people at home, and also just complete incompetence, but the incompetence not even mattering because the profit based off of cruelty powers the whole engine, and competence and innovation, never really was the focus, never really was what they were trying to achieve. So Trevor Bell, who is a U.S. Army Senior Ordnance Disposal Team member, also identified the fragment as being from a GBU-39, explaining to CNN how he drew the conclusion. So you get some boring stuff there. CNN's identification of the munition is consistent with the claim made by the IDF spokesperson, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, saying using two of the smallest munitions possible, warheads containing 17 kilos of explosives. So it'll be interesting to see that there, again, more evidence made. Serial numbers on the remnants match those from a manufacturer of GBU-39 parts based in California. So this is another thing that they found here. Again, we don't know if those are, the only bombs they used, and we don't know, again, where those bombs were targeted. Could have been very easily targeted or dropped and hit, a fuel tank or something like that. But it's very, very interesting. It's the fact that these are not only are they American-made bombs, but bombs made by Boeing, used to kill civilians fleeing in Rafah. So that is really pretty incredible stuff. Just now to a quick, broader update on things going on in this genocide. Israel forces shelled and killed attempt recently, you hear, designated as a safe zone west of Rafah. This was in the Al-Mawasi region that has been long declared as a safe zone, killing at least 21 people, including 13 women and girls, in the latest mass killing of Palestinian civilians. The UN Security Council convened an emergency meeting over Israel's ground invasion of Rafah as Spain, Ireland, and Norway formally recognized the state. The UN has received about 170 trucks of humanitarian aid over the past 3 weeks, a drop in the ocean from the 500 trucks needed each day. That's, again, 170 trucks over the past 3 weeks. So you can do a math about how many trucks being let in per day that is. And by the way, I think it's, who's blocking those crossings? It's always worth reminding, again, as the humanitarian pier floats into the ocean. Israel's incursion, launched in early May into Rafah, has forced 1 million people to flee, most of whom had already been displaced several times by Israel's bloody war on Gaza. Israel's Haaretz newspaper is reporting that an internal military probe found Israeli soldiers beat 2 Palestinian detainees from Gaza to death. The detainees were beaten on their way to Sidi Taman detention facility in the Negev Desert, which is very likely looking to be a concentration camp in the truest sense of the word at this point, with some testimonies from Palestinians that have gotten out of there. While several soldiers were questioned about the incident, no one has been arrested on suspicion of causing their deaths. Love to follow up on that in a few weeks, and I would wonder if the situation changed at all. Meanwhile, we have the former U.S. President Nikki Haley writing "Finish Them" on an Israeli shell. Danny Danon was hosting her, former current Likud member of parliament and former ambassador to the UN, posted the photo which he was taken, in which he accompanied Haley on her border visit to the northern border of Israel with Lebanon. Finish them. That is what my friend, former Ambassador Nikki Haley, wrote. Haley was the U.S. Ambassador to the UN under former President Donald Trump, and her term overlapped with Dan. So maybe that's some fun chats in the UN cafeteria there in New York. So again, apparently she was writing, according to a really great anti-Zionist Israeli Twitter user at IReallyHateYou.b.m. is the kind of display name, I guess. If you want to go find it, he's claiming there that they are white phosphorus. The canisters in the back were actually white phosphorus canisters. I don't know if that's true, but there has been a lot of evidence. You see the white clouds of smoke that are consistent, according to experts, with white phosphorus uses. There's been a lot of evidence that those have been dropped in North Lebanon throughout this war. Australia's parliament voted against recognizing Palestine as a state. 5 voted yes, Australian Greens and the independent Andrew Wilkie, and 80 representatives from the Labour government, as well as the Liberal and National parties, voted no. So that kind of goes in contrast with the fact they're one of 143 countries that voted in support of Palestine becoming a full UN member in the UN General Assembly earlier this month. And finally, the cargo vessel hit by 3 missiles in the Red Sea was hit by the Houthis. So as the U.S. has reported, destroying Houthi drones, they did not get all of them. The attack on the ship, the MV Locks, is a Greek-owned ship again. 3 of the missiles have hit it, and this is one of the most recent attacks they've carried out. They've been on a little bit of a hiatus, but they will only stop, as the Houthi officials say, when Israel suspends its war on Gaza. This is when the ship, they also hit I believe it was a British ship that was completely sunk, and the Brits tried to pretend that it wasn't sunk, as it was embarrassing to be literally the only country where a ship that the Houthis hit actually sunk, but it doesn't seem that they were successful in that, and essentially really emphasizes how poorly this war has gone for America. All right, so we're going to move on now to our last story today, and it is a pervasive sense of fear has settled in at the highest levels of the Democratic Party over President Joe Biden's re-election prospects, even among office holders and strategists who had previously expressed confidence about the coming battle with Donald Trump. So you don't want to be that guy who's on the record saying we're doomed, or the campaign's bad, or Biden's make mistakes. Nobody wants to be that guy, said a Democratic representative, this, by the way, in Politico, a Democratic operative in close touch with the White House said, and he was granted anonymity to speak freely. This isn't, oh my God, Mitt Romney might become president. It's, oh my God, democracy might end. And again, it's hard to tell whether people actually believe this in the Democratic Party, or it's just I feel like some actually do, but then they just can't, in their brain power, process the fact that they hold at the same time that if Trump gets elected, democracy might end, but it's totally fine and responsible that, hey, I have some power in the party that's putting Joe Biden up to be the nominee. Even if everything was going perfectly well, putting Joe Biden to be the nominee at 82 years old right now is an incredibly irresponsible decision. It is political malpractice in any functioning major party ever. Just look at the politicians anywhere else in the Western world. You do not see anything like this. The concern has been metastasized in recent days as Trump jaunted to 2 of the country's most liberal territories, New York and New Jersey, with that that kind of infamous Bronx rally where you had 2 second tier. I think second tier would be fair. New York drill rappers come up on stage with him and be like, we love Trump, and I think there were 2 of them. They're facing gang charges or something, but that. And honestly, in the rap community nowadays, or really ever, is a big. It's honestly hard to find people who don't have those charges, and those people are probably the most liberal among them. Chance the Rapper or something like that. But I feel like it is still very unlikely that he's going to have an uphill battle. But again, if he just makes if he's turn the page, which he definitely will. I think among Latino men is probably going to be the group that he does the best with minority wise, and that's going to play a big role, especially in a state like Nevada, especially in a state like Arizona, which he is holding on for dear life in, and he's doing absolutely horribly in the South. But it is really, really remarkable. He's a long lag behind Biden on cash on hand. Again, that does not matter. He beat Hillary, and even though Hillary creamed him in the spending, he really had a great fundraiser last month. We have people like Jamie Dimon out there praising him, which I think is a very, very big deal. The 1% clearly does not care if Trump gets back in. They don't think democracy is going to end. They think the wheels are going to keep on turning, and I think they would probably be right about that. Not to say that a Trump presidency is going to be good. It's going to be a setback on all the very marginal gains made under the Biden administration. But we have talked about how I feel about Joe Biden, but I think it's pretty undeniable to say that the Biden presidency is going to be a better presidency compared to a Trump presidency. But again, because I live in a place where my vote does not matter, and it's not worth voting for him. And personally, if you feel as passionate about the issue of Gaza and the genocide that the U.S. is committing there, and you live in a swing state, I completely understand voting or staying home or voting, for Jill Stein or Cornel West or something like that. But it really is interesting to see the panic here is setting in. Donors asked me on an hourly basis about what I think. The advisor said, calling it so much easier to show them. So while they read it, I pour a drink. I was talking about all the list of the why we could win is so small. I don't even need to keep the list on my phone. This is what the advisor said, talking about his conversations with donors on the day On the day after news broke that Biden had trailed Trump in fundraising last month, Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey raised the pressure on donors as she introduced the president to a crowd of 300. The cluster of fundraising events Biden attended in Boston that day were expected to bring more than $6 million for his political operation, but Healey said that wasn't good enough. To those of you who have opened up your wallets, thank you, Healey said, a Democrat in her first term. We'd like you to open them up a little bit more and to find more patriots who believe in this country, who recognize and understand the challenge presented at this time. Laughter rippled through the room, but Healey's voice turned serious. With unusual urgency for Healey, the governor employed the room of high-dollar donors and local Democratic leaders to think long and hard about the stakes of this election. Again, it's like you hear all this stuff about the stakes, and I do believe a good portion of the Democratic establishment is kind of high in their own supply about democracy ending, and they do believe it to some extent. But again, they're putting out an 82-year-old incompetent that's hated by the base and the swing voters with no sign of any urgency to change the situation, or I guess they're starting now to realize the situation is a little bit problematic, and instead of putting any effort to reach out to voters, to do things that work, to start canvassing, to build door-knocking operations, to actually make a change that would excite people to interact in any way with actual voters, he is stuck on raising money and watching his cash on hand number go up like it's poll numbers, like it's relevant to the poll numbers, even though we all know that, especially in the post-Trump, post-2016 era, money does not matter when it comes to elections. Both campaigns are going to have tons of free media coverage, and Biden, if anything, he should be focused about getting the headlines more and positive reasons, and blast all this horrific Gaza stuff out of the news with actual good things that he's doing. That's going to help him way more than talking to 300 billionaires in Boston. It's just political malpractice, and again, it's hard to even tell if they know what they're doing is just not going to help at all, or they just think this is what they're supposed to do, so they're just going through the motions of, we have to raise more money. Money is what matters. We need money to win. It's like, you don't need money to win. Trump is going to get up there. He's going to raise what you just raised in terms of free media, in terms of just getting on the airwaves. He's going to equal that in terms of exposure, valued into dollars. He's going to equal the amount that Biden raised in that one night in probably about 5 minutes. So it's like, it's just pointless to spend all this time doing this stuff. It's just like, I don't know. Probably some of them realize it's not helping, but the vast majority of them are just, again, going through the motions. They think this is what is right, and it's just an absolute joke. It's just an absolute joke. Trump's photo ops and PR stunts may get under the skin of some very serious DC people as compelling campaigning, but they'll do nothing to win over the voters that decide this election. Again, neither is fundraising obsessively in Boston. It's like, oh my God. It's just, people are jokes. The work we do every day on the ground and in the airwaves in our battleground states to talk about how President Biden is fighting for the middle class against corporate greed that's keeping prices high, highlight Donald Trump's anti-American campaign for revenge and retribution and abortion bans. This is the work that will secure us the White House again. And that, the bottom line is that is kind of a competent layout for what they need to do. Talk about abortion, talk about, Biden actually fighting corporate greed. But Biden actually has to be leading that message. And right now, all he can do is saying, oh, man, the economy's getting better, and I don't care about what's going on in Gaza. And by the way, this article barely mentions Gaza, which is also, journalistic malpractice. But the bottom line is, it almost feels like at least this guy, Kevin Munoz, who is a campaign spokesperson, like he knows what they need to do about their message, but Biden is not hearing it. He's not getting out and not just talking, but taking concrete steps against corporate price gouging, doing anything to in any way that will be popular, quick, and easy of all the myriad things he could do in terms of, a broader marijuana legalization campaign. He kind of did that a little bit ago, but I didn't see any videos of him talking about it. He may have done a speech, but he didn't get it out in the media in a very effective way because, all I do is look at politics news all day, and I barely saw it. Like, it should have been a much bigger thing. It did not cut through at all. Instead, all he's doing, all his time is spent is just going to fundraisers. And it's a very, very ineffective strategy. And it is very, very clear. They're pushing the abortion thing. That's very effective. It's like you don't see that message getting put out in a very effective way at all. And the rate that's getting put out now is not enough to counteract all the really, negative things, the headwinds, we should say, that they really have to do that. In the swing state of Michigan, Representative Lori Pahutsky suggested that Biden's standing is so tenuous that down-ballot Democrats can't rely on him in November, unquote, the top of the ticket to pull us along. In 2020, there was enough energy to get Donald Trump out, and there were other things on the ballot that brought young people out in subsequent elections. She said, that is not this case this time. I worry that because we've had 4 years with a stable White House, particularly young voters don't feel the sense of urgency and might not remember how disastrous 2017 was right after the Trump administration took over. Whatever the Biden campaign has been doing in these past few months, and it's a lot of activity, including $25 million in swing state ad spending, probably the most ineffective mode of political spending. It is, research shows it is the most ineffective. It has only had a limited effect. According to 538, the job approval rating is at 38.1% on the date of the State of the Union address for Joe Biden. As of Friday, it's 38.4%. And his standing against Trump has also changed a little. On April 22nd, the day Trump's criminal trial began, the presumptive GOP nominee had held a 0.3-point lead in national polls. Trump is up a point since then, currently leading Biden 1.4 points in the 538 average. Again, the criminal trial, got to put in perspective, not many people are paying attention. That is the reality. Trump, meanwhile, has already started his incursion into safe blue states. His campaign psychological warfare in New York, California, and New Jersey, where House districts will determine the control of congressional lower chamber, is spiking Democrats' already elevated blood level. New York Democrats need to wake up. Manhattan Borough President Mark Levine said, the number of people across New York, including people of color, that I come across who are saying positive things about Trump is alarming. And again, what is the reaction here? Throughout this piece, it is scolding, it is doing knowingly ineffective political maneuvers, and it is absolutely useless. What it is not is any sort of promises, any sort of positive case, and it's just complete ineffective, complete negative, complete scolding, and people are just sick of it. You've got to give some people something positive. You got to provide a narrative that makes sense. Say, this is what I will get if I vote for you. In 2020, it was like the checks. It was a COVID relief bill. It was a sense of normalcy. What is it? in 2024. It is probably the most barest example yet that we have seen is just please vote for us to stop the other guy. Please, 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 please. You know how bad he is, right? And again, increasingly, as we see crisis after crisis, the brutality in Gaza, the horrors and the loss of horrors in Gaza, but really the horrors to people's net worths over the last few years with inflation not keeping up with wages and Biden completely failing to acknowledge the crisis, A, and B, handle the crisis in an effective way. Those two things are making people really disprove that original case in their minds. It's devalidating the original case in their minds and is making the threat of Trump in comparison to the reality of now seem less and less problematic and less alarming for them. All right. So all the time we got for you guys today. We'll be back tomorrow.